Just really happy to be back reconvening and talking about affordable housing. We'll start with a call to order and a roll call of everyone who's here and participating. We'll start in the room.
Okay, so we will do the formal roll call. Chair O'Neill,
Yep, Michael O'Neill, present.
Vice Chair Roush,
Present.
Sarah Shepherd,
Present.
Riley Hanson,
Present.
and Dina Mabry.
Dina Mabry, present.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Welcome, Dina.
Thank you.
Why don't we all just give a little introduction of ourselves for Dina. Welcome her to the board, and Sarah has a chance to meet with us all in person too. So, Sarah, do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Sarah Shepherd. I'm the citizen at large. I work at Northwestern as a regulatory analyst, and I just wanted to help out with affordable housing in Helena. Thought it was a good time to join.
Very good time to join.
Yes.
I'm Michael O'Neill. I'm the executive director of the Helena Housing Authority. So, a long history of working in affordable housing circles across the state of Montana and in services developing disability services, other community support services. Been on the board since we formed it.
That's a long time.
It's getting there.
Yeah. I'm John Roush. I'm here because I'm involved in the real estate community. I'm on the board of the Helena Association of Realtors, the Montana Association of Realtors, and I have a little real estate company here in town.
I'm Riley Hanson. I work with Slate Architecture here in town, and I guess technically I am a member that has been impacted by housing insecurity. I don't know if that's actually applicable anymore, but I have used the Helena Housing Authority's kind of grants to help get my first house a number of years ago. So representing the board in that regard.
On the design community.
Yeah, that's correct.
And Dina, I think we're part of the design community as well, correct?
Yeah. My name is Dina Mabry, and I work at A&E SMA, previously just SMA. I am not a licensed architect, just to put that out there. I'm a project manager here in Helena. Born and raised in Helena. I moved away to Portland for about 20 years and am recently back in town.
Back. Thanks for joining us. So, how do you guys day to day refer to yourselves over there at A&E SMA?
Right now, we're still word salad or letter salad, I guess. So we're still A&E SMA.
Okay.
We're going through branding right now. As I'm sure you know, we had the merge of the two companies, A&E and SMA, in January. We're formalizing the sort of rebranding stuff, so we expect to have probably something a little bit more seamless for folks to say within the next couple weeks. We're excited. It's a little cumbersome answering the phone.
Well, I'm never quite sure. I sometimes stumble over acronyms. I might throw out the whole, to start throwing letters out.
So we've been calling them ASMA.
ASMA.
ASMA. I'll recommend that to the marketing folks.
Yeah, maybe they're taking names. They're taking
Maybe.
suggestions. Yeah, very good. Well, welcome everybody. Glad to be back together. Minutes. I don't know if we have a minutes. And that I don't know if others had a chance to review the minutes, and if you have, would be welcome a motion to approve the minutes from that's from March 2025. Or are these supposed to be January 25 is what we have. March 12th, 2025. Okay.
I think they have to be that old because we didn't meet in January.
That's been a year.
Yeah, that's kind of remarkable. I will confess that there may have been a time when I reviewed them, but I sure don't remember them.
April, do you mind grabbing them off the website? Okay, right here. Thank you. So, for everyone, including our newest member. When April sends out a meeting reminder and a meeting notice, she'll also send a link here to let you know that the newest information for your upcoming meeting with any kind of meeting materials, agendas, and then below that'll be minutes are there. And probably should have started off to let everyone know that. So if you didn't realize that was what was in your email, you can always access things there. But if you need them in a different form or format or attached to an email, just always email April or myself and we're happy to get you whatever you need in whatever way you need it. But she has them on the screen so people can peruse them if that's helpful.
Very good. We just review just for the committee, and then we can approve them. That we were given, we did an update related to the Twin Creek project. Twin Creek project at the time was still under construction, and it's two separate Twin Creek 4 and Twin Creek 9. The good news is that it's the first and only funded project out of our trust fund, but it very effectively marshaled. We had funded 48 units and ended up with 72. And of those 72, the overwhelming majority went to very low and extremely low income persons in the community. So it ended up being a successful use of leveraging, I think total funding, it would probably be 30-to-1 match, or higher, maybe 40-to-1 match in terms of the city's money in it. So the city's, this is the first, major project that was only project been funded, but major project. And so the city's contribution of those loan funds will allow it show a real tangible contribution to the project, which made the project successful in gaining other funds, including the low-income housing tax credit program. We had, as we will today, almost every time we meet, we'll discuss program guidelines. And then there was no public comment, and we just we had hoped to meet on April 9th, 2025. Life happens. We're back together now. And so with that, I would ask a motion to approve those minutes.
Mr. Chairman, so moved that we approve the minutes from our last meeting.
And a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Riley. And all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All righty. We wanted to start today kind of to reorient ourselves with a board orientation, just to kind of talk about the purpose of our advisory board and what's been going on in the meantime. We have some, it looks like some work being done on the guidelines that we will have a chance to discuss later in the meeting. But Anne, did you want to provide the orientation? Would you like me to kind of take the lead there?
Thank you, Chair. I can provide a little bit of information, and then I would love if you would give a little bit of some of the background or sort of the historical information of the board from a board member perspective, of the one who's been here and part of the creation. We have one brand new member today and one member who was brand new at our last meeting. And so please know that if you would like orientation type materials, we can do them and print them up, but you did not receive binders because we were in the middle of potentially changing the guidelines, which then involves changing the resolutions in the ordinance. And so everything that would be a resource document for you that we would print was potentially going to change. So everything's on our website, just so you know, if you need to pull up any historical documents, it's all there. I just didn't want you to think that we were not providing those, but we provided them as links in the event that they were all going to potentially be modified in some way. And so I want to make sure that we just cover a couple of things for everyone, but especially our new members. all of you received the email for this meeting, which means the clerk's office and our office have your correct contact, which is the first best sign. You will potentially be receiving emails from the city clerk's office regarding board trainings or information that applies to multiple boards. April and I will send you information specific to this board, but they do host orientations or how to run a meeting or dealing with the public. A variety of different topics are covered in the board training that the clerk's office coordinates. And they're typically do them quarterly. You only need to attend one a year to stay an active member of a board. So as those come out and we see them, you might get them twice because we'll remind you of those as well.
Just commented, excellent high quality training and mostly focused on public board governance in the state of Montana. So a couple key things we got to keep in mind. We're an advisory board to the city commission, but we're still a public board, which means that our work takes place in public, that we don't have side conversations. We're not doing business on the email, stuff like that. And so sometimes that on public boards I've been on, that people sometimes, well, you know, it's email, I can send you around and then we will be ready for the meeting. No, that just can't happen. And so that's probably the most important thing, that public boards, the business occurs in public at this meeting. It's on the agenda and the public has an opportunity to participate if they're so interested.
Thank you, Chair. I think that is one of the main things that may seem at first to not really make sense. Like, why wouldn't we email ahead of time? And it's because once a certain number of people are emailing from the board, you've just created a quorum that's an unnoticed public, basically. And so the local government center does a great job with the trainings. I've gone as staff and find them helpful for boards that I sit on outside of my work life too. So I think it's really helpful, but that is, you'll notice that it seems like we're sending you information out into the abyss, but it's so that people can't accidentally hit reply all.
Our emails will always be a blind CC.
So that there isn't that potential quorum. Also, maybe with this board, maybe not, but with some other boards, some of the things have been to remind everyone that toward the end of the agenda, we can talk about member communications and what we want to talk about at the next agenda. But if it's not on the agenda, it's not something we can talk about because the public didn't know we were going to talk about it, if that makes sense in kind of the simplest of terms. Because if a member of the public looked at this agenda and they're like, oh, that's not the one I want to go to, it must be the next meeting, and then we talk about something that's not on here, they missed their opportunity to participate in the public process. So I feel like those are some of the kind of like big main things so that you understand what the process is and why we do things the way we do, instead of having like a subcommittee that meets ahead of time. Might make it seem like the meeting would go more efficiently, but in this case, it's because that then looks like we're trying to leave out the public, which we're not. And then I did mention the website already. There is historical information out there, copies of the creating documents that put the board together. Also, it's a good place to find information if you have questions about your role as a board member as well. Periodically, the commission or the clerk's office will go through and kind of review some of the duties assigned to boards. I don't know with how new this board is that will be up anytime soon, but they do it. So just know that at some point that might be something that's on the agenda so they can get feedback from all of you as members as well. But you should mostly just be receiving communications from April, from me, or from the city clerk's office. Since you're appointed by the commission, they'll have all the pertinent information about anything that's required of you outside of these meetings, like trainings. And then Chair, I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit more about the actual philosophy of these funds, the philosophy of the board itself.
So the fund was created, the sale of the city's bus station, which was downtown. And with those funds, it created an opportunity. I think it was 1.4 million. I may be wrong there. And it was kind of following in line with what was, I think primarily we followed the Missoula model, where they've put much larger sums into a housing trust fund, which they were able to leverage into a significant development of affordable housing. Cities of Missoula, Billings, and Great Falls also have the advantage of being entitlement cities, which makes a big difference. And just their larger population size, I think we'll certainly have more funds and resources to do projects with. But it's a good idea. It's a way, in general, we're trying to leverage the city's funding. And so historically, or when you look through the priorities and the guidelines, that one of the big things is trying to maximize the amount of money being spent or loaned through the city and to other resources. It's not necessarily meant to replace and cover all the costs of a housing project. It's meant to make a difference and fill a gap. It's kind of more of gap financing. But it's at the same time, it's supposed to be looking to fill a broad whole continuum of housing needs in the community, and really is only limited by what the community developers or agencies coming forward in the community bring forward to the board. Since we haven't met, there's actually been discussion about a lot of this group about the trust fund and at the city commission meetings, and we weren't able to have meetings, so we weren't able to advise in our role. But I think we can probably hear about what some of the what would really not be a direction, because it was really more just a discussion. But part of our role can be is kind of refocusing, what the purpose of this fund was and why it was done in a certain way in terms of how affordable housing generally is funded. That it's generally not, it's not. This isn't really funding for direct funding to individuals, with a housing need. That it's meant to go through kind of intermediary. Like there could be, like a use would be, a local agency could come forward and say, want to do home buyer assistance to individual home buyers, for example, and that would be an eligible use. But individuals aren't applying to this fund for their own uses and things like that. But generally, multifamily rental, both development of new construction or rehabilitation of existing or preserving existing affordable housing is certainly a major need in the community. And then the whole variety, it could even be used for things like shelters, emergency shelters, and transitional living facilities and things like that in the community. So and then home ownership construction could be it could help subsidize to bring down you'll see this in larger funds in larger cities where they might finance and subsidize both the construction and then the other side, subsidizing the purchase on affordable homeownership developments. In that scenario, it could be a larger development where certain amount of money is targeted at so many homes in a development that would then be deed restricted and be targeted at people. Generally, we're looking at folks at 80% or below median income, which is the number that is standard in affordable housing circles. And I think we left ourselves some wiggle room that we would consider projects that meet housing needs in the community that are above the 80%. But where you run into some challenges is that a lot of the other particularly the federal housing programs, are restricted to that 80% and below. Other folks, what do you think we've, you know,
Well,
been the most important pieces?
one of the things that we've talked about in the past, I guess, that you just throw out there basically is the fact that for a relatively long period of time, we were kind of spinning our wheels trying to get people to actually apply for this fund. And so, you know, we've had some meaningful conversation, I guess I'd say, about trying to figure out how it is to shift the focus from multi-million-dollar large development type projects where we are the sort of the last money in, to things that might be a little bit more approachable for people who are actually trying to get smaller things accomplished and done and applied for, you, just to give us more to talk.
I think in general, there's a lot of projects that are kind of in the works since we formed this at a certain, you know, million plus investment. The cost of construction is probably doubled, if not more. Triple. Yeah, yeah. And so that is the primary challenge, I think, is the affordability of actually getting a project underway in the ground, you know, in the ground. And so we and a lot of our other sources have not grown to match need, but there's ways of being creative and getting it all together. And we've worked really hard on some things that will make a difference in terms of making projects work. But so this money, whether it's a gap filler, it's often the first money in, because it then helps you get your other money, because it shows. It used to be some letters from the city commission was support from your community. That doesn't cut it any longer. And you know, they're wanting, you're seeing cities putting, you know, 10, 15, $20 million into projects. And so you know, if they have those resources. So it's be clear that these aren't funds that are direct grants. These are low interest loans, and it's kind of structured that way. So the funds will, you know, in a slow way come back, and some will come in as construction, some will come in as permanent, but they do, for the most part, are the preferences to have some sort of loan aspect of the fund, so that it keeps going on, even though it may take a while, that the funds will come back to the city.
How much money have we loaned out?
$1 million.
Yeah. And was it 1.2? Was it 1.2?
Yeah, they came back to us and we changed them.
Yeah. One per 8. Yeah.
To answer your question, Chair, the project received a $1 million loan. They did come in and ask the commission to reconsider the rules within, or the items within the guidelines that limited the dollar amounts they could ask for. And the commission did decide to waive those at their request. And so it did look a little bit confusing, like they were asking for more money, but because it's two separate loans, it's a $1 million construction loan that then converts, as you said, to permanent / 18-year loan. And current guidelines at the time when they applied had a $400,000 limit on that 18-year. They asked to double that and have it interest-only payments, and the commission approved that. So it's still just $1 million, but when they're ready to convert, instead of paying back $600,000 to the fund to have the $400,000 left for that second new loan, they're actually paying back $200,000 to go into the pool, and then their 18-year loan is at $800,000 instead of $400,000. So I don't know if this is sometimes when I talk dollar amounts, and I don't know if we should have it visual for people. So it did look confusing, and it looked confusing even at the public meeting, because people thought they were asking for more than the $1 million, but really it's that they were asking to just pay back less of their construction loan than was required by the program, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so it is still just the 1 million for construction, and then 800,000 for the 18-year permanent loan, which leaves approximately $1.4 million in the fund. Because while they have been, totally on time, perfect with their interest payments, right now on the construction loan, they're paying interest only. So it's a little over $800 a month coming into the fund that could be used by another project. So when they're ready to convert, which might be sometime this fall, it sounds like they've been really ahead of schedule. $200,000 will come back in. That could be something a different project could apply for. But the other $800,000, it's going to be 18 years before that's money that can be lent out to another entity. And before we get too far into what might be regular item C, I just want to mention that part of that process is why we started looking very carefully at what the guidelines does and does not allow. And there were some sections that looked like potentially an entity could come in and ask for grant funding for maybe like community land trust project that could maybe provide like 5 homes and diminish the funding grant, and then there'd be no one left. So we started looking at those saying, oh, is this really the intent, or did we leave it trying to be flexible and usable for every entity that might come in? Did we somehow inadvertently kind of miss the sustainability? So I'll stop there, since that still kind of fits in history and board orientation and doesn't jump too much to kind of why we're looking at the guidelines. Yeah.
Alrighty. And again, I forget what day of the week. We beat on the. Is this the
Second.
Second Wednesday, yeah.
Second Wednesday. So, and we will only meet when we have business, but generally, I think we'll have business here moving forward from that for a while. So, that will be our next meeting. Would be August. What's the
August 12th, sure.
12th. Okay. Should work. And alrighty. So I think the board is not, we just meet, it's pretty informal, and you can meet by Zoom if that's more convenient. For a long time we met by Zoom.
So this started during COVID.
Yeah. So I think we've all kind of nice seeing people a little bit, but so that's available to you. All right. Project updates is I think on that item. And do you want to give that update or?
Thank you, Chair. I think part of the update I kind of gave as we were talking about loan dollar amounts. So sorry for the repetition, but just real quick, and then Chair O'Neill can talk a little bit about the actual face of the positive impacts of this. But as he mentioned, Twin Creek 4, which is the project that this program actually funded. So have all of their homes for people, but it was very specific. The city's loan went for 54 units, but the whole project was 72. So we really, in the end, got extra units for people to live in for what those funds were. So but both 9 and 4 are fully leased up as of the other day. Seth let me know that every unit is full, which is very exciting, especially because they got it done very quickly, and I know people have been waiting. Their retainage that the program holds until they're done with construction has been released, so they have those extra funds that they requested. And as I mentioned, when they're ready to convert to their permanent / 18-year loan, they will be making a $200,000 payment back into the fund to be used for other projects. And as I mentioned, Seth seemed to think they might be ready to do that a little bit early, which is also exciting for potential future projects to have that money a little bit ahead of time. So they're still within the time that they don't need to yet, but he said they're pretty close. So we might see those funds a little bit sooner than we thought, which would be nice. And I think that's the only update I have on what they're doing, other than if Chair O'Neill, if you want to talk a little bit about how they decided to go with vouchers and work with your program or family you want to talk about without me.
So we were lots of times the Helena Housing Authority is actually an idea that started here in Helena, and then we were able to originally we were going to do a demonstration just in our Helena area, and we were able to work with our other public housing authorities around the state that also run voucher programs, including the statewide PHA with the Department of Commerce, to just by chance chatting, talking, walking dogs with a lobbyist friend of mine, said, why don't you bring that to Behavioral Health Commission, which we did, and they funded what's called a fair market rent appeal survey, and so we put together the first successful statewide fair market rent appeal in the history of HUD. So, and it's actually been well received. It was presented at national conferences on it and things. And fair market rents is every county and metropolitan area in the country is given a fair market rent for the various bedroom sizes, and that metric is used in a variety of housing programs for saying what is the market. Basically, it's supposed to represent 40% or below of standard rental housing in your community. So it's not the luxury units and it's not substandard housing. It's supposed to be that, Goldilocks, just right, 40%. And so for a number of years we saw fair market rents, because it's all based on census data and periodic, what's called American Community Survey, which they don't really do in Montana. And they've been adjusting in recent years based on 7 large real estate data rent firms, which don't really operate in Montana either. So we were at a great disadvantage as our rents. Lewis and Clark County was 2 different national groups said top 5 counties in the country for rent increases, percentage rent increases. It's not the most expensive rent in the country, but the percentage of rent going up. And then Montana maintains being the least affordable state in the nation for housing, and the relationship between our wages and the cost of housing, both for rent and for home ownership. And so we were right in the middle of a tough situation, but we surveyed 100,000 renter households in Montana, and we were able to document that our fair market rents in many cases were about half of what the market really was at that 40% level. And so what that made a big difference was we were below 20%. Someone would get a voucher and could not use it. It's like the false promise. They're on a wait list for 2-3 years. You get a voucher. Oh, I'm fine. It's, so, and if you got it, we do quality inspections and make things are healthy and safe, but there's a big difference sometimes in the between what will pass as a minimal quality standards and then having a variety of what anyone would consider quality housing. And so with the increase in the fair market rents, people could then go out in the community and lease up. That happened a year ago, really, July 1st. By chance, Twin Creek first phase got done late July or August 2nd or something. So we were able to project base the first Twin Creek 9, 20 units in there. And then when they finished the second Twin Creek 4, really around Thanksgiving time, and I think we signed a contract. I think December 14th, and on December 16th, HUD said you couldn't do any more they were pulling back on the funding for the program, so we went ahead. We hadn't leased everything up, but we did project based, and then we also had we've been able to get a lot of voucher or just regular voucher holders in there, and I think we've had 4 of our homes program voucher holders into the new housing, and I think at least 2 of our veteran administration supported housing participants in there. So I think all but it might close to 100% are folks who, for the most part, are below 30% of local median income, which is a very low number. So that was good to make that happen, but it could have all gone very different because it was just a matter of the timing and getting those things together. But that's a big part of our big lease up, and we're finally, other than that, fair market rent developers kind of use that as a measure of do projects pencil as a reflection of the local market. And so when our fair market rents were being shown, at half, 50% less, that they would they just move on. So all of a sudden we now have a lot of activity that both private and some affordable units coming online. So that's really what happened there. So we're excited about that work being done. It opens up supply of housing available, but it also improves the quality. And so you probably haven't had a chance, to see Twin Creeks, and it's really a beautiful project. So in terms of a feather and this advisory board's cap, that was successful in every which way you
Yes,
say.
very successful.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, a very successful project, very good looking project. I think, financially, it sounds like they're even ahead of the ball game. I think, we could have chose a better kind of flagship project to launch this fund.
So it's and in terms of the amount of money that the city has into it, I sometimes hear whispering that, oh well, we're not getting anything done. Well, with $1 million, $1 million, I can't get a contractor to cross the street for. It's like there's a pile of $1 million over there. Would you come pick it up? So that's, I think that was something to be proud of. And then there are projects out there, and we'll see what we'll have to discuss when might be a timing thing. We're getting a lot of was at a training in Missoula yesterday, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines, and their process, and they're really wanting to see projects coming out of Montana, stuff like that. And it just, a lot of the other programs, low income housing tax credit, got a little boost from the housing bill that still is in limbo. I'm not sure. Road to home, I think it's going to pass without a signature. It's kind of unclear because I think we're still in the 10-day zone. It's like, why you first bipartisan anything and forever, and then you blow it up. But we'll see. But that will give a boost to make permanent some changes in the tax credit program that allow a larger allocation to the states, and it also will help on. There's only certain types of entities that buy the tax credit, primarily banks and insurance companies and things like that, where it works for them. And but they were capped at like 15% of that type of investment, and now it's going to 20%. So that expands the market. So hopefully, should help on the pricing side of tax credits, because so that, plus the other thing that's hurt pricing is that with the tax bill of a year ago, whatever they refer to it, the big beautiful or big purple bill, whatever side of the equation you want to fall on, that eliminated a lot of corporate taxes, so it's like they didn't need the tax credit as much, so that hurt pricing a little bit. But so there were some things moving forward, and I think there's things that we're doing in Montana that are helpful. Some stuff like the city was really out in front on in terms of making, eliminating kind of the single family home district that you can by right be able to put in uh, duplexes and fourplexes and ADUs and all that stuff. And we're not seeing a lot of that. I think we still need to kind of show the roadmap of how that can be done by individuals. It still requires architects and engineers, and doesn't seem that much affordable. Put a little ADU in it, $450,000 anyways. But we've also allowing kind of manufactured and things that wasn't available previously. So I think we'll see more and more of that. And so I think when we put out for projects, we're busy trying to get things together to move forward on our rehabilitation of all the public housing in the community and build some additional units on public housing property once it's no longer designated as public housing. In terms of that limited program, will still be funded through HUD. It's just a different. They make you do all kinds of things. So why say just let's do this, But so that's all happening, and that moves us to discussion of program guidelines. I think there seems to be a lot of red things in here. So, and you want to give us a kind of the history of what's been going on in the development department as you guys been reviewing?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. And if I might just jump back real quick to something you said a moment ago about the tax credits. You may or may not recall that is why this project came back and asked the commission to reconsider how the funding worked, because from the time they started their project, tax credits all of a sudden were not worth the same dollar amount. So just so you know, that's sort of a real world example of what happened based on what he was saying about those. That was why they came back in and said, hey, to make this work, we got to figure out something different. And so I think here we saw the exact example of that before some of these additional changes came in. So, but thank you, Chair. Just as a kind of overview, the City Commission approves program guidelines and application documents. And so what's on the website right now and what we used for Twin Creek is the currently approved guidelines and application. And many sections, for those of you who've been here a long time, will know that there were many phrases that came directly from the documents that created this fund and created the board. So just as sort of an overview, any changes we make to this document or propose changes or suggestions to the commission do have to go before the commission, will require new resolutions, will also, if we make changes, require amendments to the previous one. So there are a few steps still ahead of us before we can actually open a cycle. And we'll have to see kind of how the calendar goes and the board's thoughts, but I'm very hopeful that maybe we can be creative and find a way to have a not much, but a few week longer application cycle than we have in the past, because there are murmurings of projects out there that have had questions about the trust fund, but I couldn't really answer because I don't know what the commission's desire is and what direction to go. So I haven't been able to tell them they were eligible, but they also couldn't apply because we didn't have an open cycle and it would affect that. And so my initial thought for you guys to think about as we go through this is potentially having it open at least twice as long as we have in the past. In the past, it was 8 weeks and 10 weeks. But depending on when we can get through commission and what their thoughts are, I mean, it's possible in the end they may not want to change any of it, right? And so we need to be open to that would be a faster process that we could open. But potentially maybe toward the end of fall, maybe we could have a cycle open for applicants, have it open for quite some time. Like maybe almost a whole month and a half, 2 months full. And then still be able to at least have a preliminary decision in time for any applicant that might also be applying for Board of Housing, because we've really heard that at least having the initial yes from the City Commission helps them score better, right, among their peers when it's competitive. And so that's my wishful thinking, is that potentially we could have it open, have eligible quality projects apply, and still have them maybe be able to say more than just that they applied for these funds when they go to compete. But maybe it's that, and then they send an addendum, because that's typically marked, right?
Yeah, but they can put together a proposed funding, in advance of those application cycles, that we can make a determination, is that a reasonable expectation of funding?
So just so you know, that's my hope, so that they can receive the benefit of applying for these funds and potentially knowing if they would be awarded a loan when they go to compete. But as the chair mentioned, there are a variety of thoughts that you will see in this document about what could be changed, what maybe shouldn't. And the one thing I will say, the board provided a lot of, you all spent a lot of time going through these at previous meetings and giving really good feedback. And that really helped open the discussion. And I think in a couple of cases it made people think about things they hadn't thought of before, that then potentially changed something else later on. So what you see in front of you now has, and this is in no way official, we had to give an update at the City Commission administrative meeting a few months ago, but it was just an update. They received this as here are some potential thoughts. They had a lot of questions about some of the suggested changes. I also recognize and will be open to any thoughts about where a change on one section changes another section and we missed somehow making those cohesive. Because there were so many different people looking at it and different thoughts, there were a couple things where we left in one section so people could see what it was, but then also proposed changing something that undoes it. And really the main point was figuring out, we had one really amazing first project. And I feel like we really lucked out as a board and as a community to have a project like that come and then over deliver. I also feel like I heard that they ended up coming in a little under budget and added carports that weren't originally going to be there, which just is one of those things that helps add to the value for the people who live there. And so I feel like that's even just little things like that, I think, are extra exciting, that they just continue to go above and beyond. But recognizing that with about 1.4 million left for the foreseeable future, 1.6 for the next 18 years, that what is the highest and best use of these funds? Sitting in a bank account is not the highest and best use. And personal opinion, maybe a grant that doesn't ever come back and helps fewer people maybe also isn't. So maybe a combination somehow. There are others who think that there should be grants every year, based on how much the commission is committed to adding into the fund each year, which is $100,000. And so I think that's something to think about. And as I said, in the end, it is up to the commission and they will decide it. But as people who work in the field, people who live in this community, people who work in this community, I think it's really important to have your feedback on one, are we making it sustainable? And by sustainable, it's not like, oh, we're earning a bunch of interest, which it could be if we treated it like an actual trust, which right now we're not, right? Because we're spending the main core of the money. So it's not like, oh, we're only spending the income. But also, do we want to treat it maybe like a revolving loan fund, right? Because it's a little bit like that now, minus the part that allows for grants for the ability to maybe not repay your full loan, right? A little bit of loan forgiveness for certain entities. And so really looking at how to keep the fund sustainable, keep it flexible enough that projects that are eligible and would meet requirements like 35-year period of affordability, an entity that can actually say, we're going to do that, not we're going to turn around and sell these in 5 years as luxury, right? How we keep it sustainable, flexible, enticing for entities to apply, but also looking at what might be the highest and best use of very limited dollars in the event that no new funds come in, other than if the commission decides to continue adding $100,000 each year. And so really kind of looking at that balance. We've had some feedback from other people in the field who had some comments about what maybe they thought should or shouldn't be eligible. You'll see under eligibility some of the things that Chair O'Neill mentioned as eligible activities. We've had some comments that if other entities in the state provide that service right now with the limited funds that are in here now, not knowing the future, that maybe that is not the best use of these funds if they're available in another way within the state, like homebuyer assistance programs or whether transitional housing or shelters that could apply for, say, HUD CDBG funds. Also, those funds are grants. This is a loan. Or should these have more grants in them? So I'm just going to throw all of that out there. And I don't know how you would best like to start. I can give you a couple highlights, some of the things that are recommended to change were the interest rate. We talked about that a lot at the last meeting about, at 1%, our group's going to take it seriously and use it how board or how we think the intent of the commission was. Had a lot of conversations back and forth with people about how many other funding sources are very specific about what you can and can't use these funds for, and that ours having some allowable uses of like the actual development and the actual architectural plans and things really allowed for the flexibility here. But always considering these are public dollars. So if people look at it and say, well, but I thought we were buying windows and doors. Well, there are some projects they can only buy. I am simplifying it, but and others that say, well, you can't have a project if you don't have anybody to draw up the plans for you, right? So some of those sorts of uses may be different than the do we want to I don't want to speak for the commission, but I don't think the goal is to charge high interest rates to make a lot of money. The point was that this is supposed to be low interest, but also then how are those funds actually being used because they're so much lower than the other funds they had. I know there was a lot of talk back and forth about increasing it or tying it to prime. I've had some thoughts lately, but I have not spoken out loud until now with you guys. So I don't know anyone. But looking at places like Missoula that open a cycle and say, here's the exact dollar amount that is available to apply for this cycle. In the past, we've just said, here's how much money there is, and there's a $1 million limit on grants. Maybe we keep that, maybe we don't, but what I'm wondering is in that process, in the way that they set a dollar amount, maybe we just say, instead of putting in exact percentages or tying them to something else that maybe ends up being way more complicated than it needs to be, we just say for 2026 or 2027 or 2028, whatever year it is, this is what the interest rate is that you will be applying for. Interest rates go up, that's fine. You're still locked in at 2% for this year, whatever it is. But that it allows an applicant to really plan out their future, but it allows the board and the commission to have a little bit of flexibility if they see a lot of projects coming in. Really, the repayment of the loan and the interest are kind of the only funds coming in here to use for projects, without looking like we're trying to just make a lot of money on interest that's not necessary, right? We just wanted to help the community. So some of those conversations that got a little bit more in depth than I would have imagined for one paragraph, that I think is really helpful to make sure that we're not making what looks like a little change that then somehow makes the program undesirable or unusable, right? Like that's not the goal. The goal is to get more houses for people to live in.
I think what you're suggesting in terms of you can do almost both ways, that each year that you have a clear updating of the guidelines when it goes out. But that you can also suggest a methodology. One of the things that taking a fresh look at this again, where we have in certain items we have a fixed dollar kind of thing. With dollar amounts have changed radically in some ways that we should look for some benchmark kind of thing. So I do think the intent is to provide a well below market. It would be a wildly different kind of approach for the city to use this as kind of an enterprise fund or something. I mean, I think the idea is to stimulate and leverage affordable housing dollars coming into the community to house people. I think fundamentally want to get people housed and to address that crisis. And so, but there's some things in here that we could look at, like operating expenses per unit between $3,000 and $6,000. I don't know if that's a reasonable thing. I know
Property tax relation.
Yeah, I mean, Federal Home Loan Bank.
Members don't.
Yes, the Federal Home Loan Bank sets operating expense per unit and you can go higher because some operating, if you're providing services and part of that, it's not apples to apples kind of thing. But I think the percentage type things work, but that perhaps you could establish, like, we're going to establish a fixed term amount, loan amount, kind of following this benchmark, but that you would set it at that for that funding year, because that would actually do a large favor, because one of the things that are really blowing out projects now is that the shifting interest rates and things like that that's been going on, and just the general uncertainty with tariffs and things like that going on materials. So I think that's a really good idea. I think the city, I would encourage the city to think other ways that they might be able to contribute more. A lot of, I don't know, $100,000 seemingly a certain element in the community thinks $100,000 gets you a lot of things. Like go to more meetings, like, oh, if we had $100,000, I'm like, folks, it's not, and people, oh, well, you can't expect how when people are shocked when it costs to do things, and the unit costs on new construction on units. We just opened bids on this rebuild on a fire. It's 400,000 to replace that unit. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's still standing. I mean, it's like that's just what thing. But like using some things like this, the state, the housing tax credit program will have because they're capturing a kind of a whole market. We can make some. You don't have to be we can make what is a reasonable comparison point that we can then adjust using that. And then in this guidelines, like each year for each funding cycle, that this may be adjusted for that section. We'll state a benchmark that will be used in setting that. I think, and that will allow us to stay current because it just really is. In typical world, 3 or 4 years, something shouldn't become kind of outdated. But we just went through some extraordinary cost increases and stuff, particularly in construction, particularly Montana. So,
And to add to that discussion, I mean, I agree that we should aim to maybe try to set a benchmark that's less just a finite dollar amount, or of course we just have to update it every year. For example, $20,000 at the beginning of last year wouldn't even get you halfway to construction by the end of last year. Like that's how much those construction costs increased. And to that point, either we just need to update what those numbers look like every year in terms of what we are expecting, like dollar amount per unit, for example, and or again, just tied to potentially, of course, the national median rent, but at the same time, that doesn't get updated all the time either. So maybe it is a matter of we just need to reconvene at least once a year to kind of discuss how those costs have increased and what the market looks like.
I mean, I think our role in reviewing the guidelines before every funding application cycle and advance of that cycle, I think that's been primarily our job, and I think that is our job to advise on that, and also give response because it will come if the city commission were advisory to the board, and if they're having conversations, I would think they would want us to have that come back to us for us to have some discussion.
I think so too, Chair, and I think that's part of once we started looking at this, right, we started seeing a lot of different opportunities to find ways to, as I've said before, keep it flexible and desirable. 1% is pretty desirable still right now.
Yeah.
But also find ways to, in no way trying to circumvent the public or the process, but knowing that anytime a word gets changed in this, it has to go to commission, it has to have a new resolution, it has to do all the steps, right? And so if there are things we can do, like put language in that says prior to an application cycle, that year's interest rate will be set, or whatever it is, where we we're not trying to circumvent the public, we're not trying to do anything, we're trying to keep it to be something that is active. And then based on some of the things you said about some of the really specific rental terms, as far as I understand, a lot of this kind of came from other programs that already exist.
Yeah.
Because the whole point is that this money is the little bit of dollars that's a lot of leverage, right? That shows community buy-in, shows all of that, and competing for projects, but it's not really the main funder. And so in a couple of different sections, you'll see that we just defer to whatever their main funding requirements are.
Right.
So that instead of having to write requirements that change if federal program requirements change or one of their others, we just say, if you passed an inspection for this program that is more stringent than ours, you don't have to do another one with us. You don't have to pay us to come do it. You just send us a copy of that, right? Because if they're meeting something more stringent than we would ever be, we don't want to add work for people. They're already doing the hard work of providing the housing. And so
what was the rate? Sorry to interrupt.
No.
What was the ratio for when you create something like 35 to 1,
Mhm.
something like
It
that.
ended up
And in the-
even bigger
And
than.
in the guidelines, it's written to be 5 to 1,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so I mean, your point's pretty well taken.
And to be fair, certain types of projects will, you know, like a tax credit project will, we more likely be able to do that versus, you know, where you become challenged, you know, like if you're building a shelter, you know, but the match part is also to, even at 5 to 1, is meant to stimulate that this isn't to pay for the project. This is to give you a good foundation to go out and go get more funds. And,
Yeah.
Right.
Just show initial investment
Convince
is there.
others that
Mhm.
This is a worthwhile
Yeah.
project in the city guys. Sense. Can I ask one
Yeah.
question? Because you mentioned this earlier. And I think it's worth, I don't know, at least 2 minutes of discussion. Is there anything in particular to be gained by to seeking to change the name of this? Because it's not a trust. Does that, thank you, does that in future set us up for better discussions with city and with any other outside users to better understand how this money really is intended to function? I'm just asking, I don't know the
I think it would be useful to look and see what other cities are calling. A lot of cities do call funds like this that aren't trusts similarly. You know that they're actually it is a trust to the extent that primarily it's loan funds or meant to be loan
Sure.
funds, and so.
But
it's helpful.
But that name's not even there at all. The Affordable Housing Fund. Does that make it easier for us to have different discussions about different, so many widely different variable functions, programs, and uses for the money?
I think they came up with trust because that's what they called it in the middle.
Yeah, and it's an easy sort of,
But it's not just around the country that you see that, and they aren't necessarily trusted like in a sense of word.
Chair, Vice Chair, I think that's a really important question to ask that is on my list for when we go before the commission again for their next update at an admin meeting at the end of the month is really there are new members who weren't here when this was created. We've got board members who were here when it was created, not necessarily knowing the original intent. It's just important to know, have a sense of some of that original intent, and if we're going to make changes, what the current intent of the commission is. Do they want it to be a trust fund? And somehow the guidelines aren't actually letting it function that way. Do they want it as a revolving loan? Do they want it as a grant program? And so I think that's an important question and was one I was going to pose to the commission themselves is how do they actually want what's remaining of this fund to function and exist and be used in the event that no new funds come in, right? Because I've heard some comments in the community already. Like, if we spend it all, they'll put another $1 million in. And I just don't know that at this time frame that's very realistic. Having listened to discussions about the fire station that doesn't have staff in the budget, right? So while that is, I think, a very hopeful idea and maybe something to work toward, I don't know if members of the community are understanding that when they spend it, there might not be more that comes in. So how do we use to the best use what we have? Part of that, I think you'll see reflected in some of the potential
People can donate to it.
Yeah. People can donate to it. I don't know if that was something that was seen in other communities or if they just wanted an opportunity for people to be able to do that. I mean, I can see there are some folks who might, or entities that might find that beneficial, but they also probably already have their own foundations or their own funding sources that potentially someone uses match. And so when we go through here, keeping those sorts of things in mind, and yes, that will ask them about.
No, but
Does the name changes in
these
that?
kind of these funds where, you put together a loan fund and, I'm buying large cities and all the large bank entities throw in a fund. And we kind of, Mayworks Montana kind of does that, Montana does that kind of thing, but, there's a lot of things, we can do here. I mean, I do think there needs to be some understanding that if you nickel and dime it, it's not going to get you your impact that you would like it, and so in using it for kind of finding individual kind of you know funding ADUs at people's houses or something. I mean, it has the attraction of, well, we'll have an ADU, but it's not. I don't think that's what this fund's for.
Right. Well, and maybe when we had originally formed this trust fund and started kind of crafting these guidelines, our original intent was at least closer to an actual trust fund where we're opening up the ability for home buyer assistance and single family dwelling development with certain caveats for loan forgiveness. As I'm kind of reading through here, we're kind of tightening that up, and I agree with the justification that there are other programs out there that provide some of these services, such as home buyer assistance, and that this fund is specifically intended to kind of go out and help, provide that stopgap funding for the large developments. And so, in the interest of, I guess, clarifying the use and intent of this fund, I would agree probably removing trust from the actual moniker makes a lot of sense in terms of not only just clarifying our position, but advertising to those developers like this is specifically a loan fund for that development, and not just some trust fund that we're just handing out checks to people.
I do want to go back to what you had said earlier, and just because I want to wrap my head around it a little bit more carefully and make sure that I understand the thought. Because I don't disagree, but I want to make sure that I have, people are going to ask me about this at some other meeting. On a unit by unit basis, what do I tell people who say that they do want to put an ADU in their backyard and they want to figure out a way to afford it? Right? Why wouldn't this be an appropriate? Because scale wise, it's going to scale way down.
No, I think it could. It could. I mean, if the other elements could come into play. I mean, the purpose of this is an affordable. And so
you have to be able, as an owner or an individual or whatever, to be able to commit to some sort of standard that says that you're going to
right.
get it.
So let's look a little bit at the history. The city's first venture into affordable housing was the Sealy building. and so didn't turn out quite affordable. And so that's and one of the things I think they want in here, I can't put words in their mouth, but is compliance. Most of the funding things would have some other way of confirming the compliance. So you can put a deed restriction, say, on something, but that doesn't tell you that the people who are in that thing, but if it's in a tax credit property or a home program property, or if it's in that
if it qualifies for a Section 8 tenant.
If it qualifies for a Section 8 tenant, then you know
that the housing authority has to be administered
that there be income eligible persons.
Yeah.
But there won't be. I mean, there would be a way of doing it, but the city, I think, wanted it to be. They don't have compliance staff, and so they were kind of relying on other programs. Compliance staff. I do, but I would only have involvement in it if we had a voucher person in there. And so, I mean, it could be a thing that they would dedicate it to people who are on vouchers. That would ensure a low, certain low income thing. And so on a scaling thing, you would get you know, you'd get that one unit, which would be good. I mean, it answers.
So the only question that I have really about the scaling challenge really is there a way, even though, you know, honestly, it probably should be a much higher number than the 5-to-1 number that we're using now, right? But is there a way that, you know, the last $10,000 project, you know, if I had $100,000, I tear down the POS rental that sits right next to my house that I own, and I could have a garage with a new rental unit that would be a much better, real and qualified rental space above it, right? And so, you know, as an individual, that's the kind of thing that goes through my head.
No, I think that's.
We are allowing it to use, and we don't see any of them being built. How do we facilitate that necessary too?
It just.
We don't, right?
Certain
Said that ADUs now are gonna be okay, but nobody's putting them up.
Well, Chair, I do think second dwelling units have been allowed, right? Like you could have a duplex, you could have an ADU. There was discussion at the commission meeting, should this be used for ADUs? We did run into some thoughts where, like with Twin Creek, there's a deed restriction on it for 35 years. So even if they sell it, the next entity has to rent income restricted, right? Like they have to follow the rules even if they sell it. So if you build something on the back half of your lot.
Structure in place
Mhm.
that is so if they rent to a non-compliant person, particularly on the initial lease up, their entire tax credits for that unit would be lost. You know, so there was a really strong incentive for
them to maintain that.
For maintain compliance, and there is regular audits of compliance done by this other legit.
Well, the other part of it is that if you're gonna sell your unit, your house that has the unit in the back of it, well, then it's a cash on demand trigger, right? So, okay, fine. The next guy does not have to buy that unit and keep it as an ADU, but all of the money comes back right now at sale, right? So that's an additional deed restriction that just has to be satisfied if you sell your house. We get our money back right now.
And Chair, if I may, we did look at a lot of different, like, what could help maybe, and I do recognize that we have 13 minutes left, but, and we can continue the discussion. I do want you to know that at least a reopening of this discussion with the commission based on the questions they asked at the last one is at the end of July. It's not to approve these, but it's to provide them additional information and reopen the discussion. And so part of their question was things like ADUs, and feel like at least two of our members can maybe give me some accurate information. But following that, we reached out to a couple of different firms and said, what would the potential cost be if a homeowner came and was looking to do 1,000 square foot, which might be a little bit, it's bigger than people think of tiny homes, but for an ADU that is, because we heard discussion about, oh, well, my family member who is older wants to build one and then rent out their larger home, right? And then they would go live there. And trying to figure out what do you do with deed restrictions on one piece of property and not affect their home that is potentially their retirement, right? And still make what public dollars have been invested be a long-term rent. And so part of what we
are clean.
And so part of what we looked at was what is kind of the going rate. And I don't know if the numbers were based on the fact that, like you said, you can't get somebody to walk across the street for $100,000. That's
ADU is more than ADU. That's pretty standard. You know, you might have
That's a small house.
right.
Yeah, 500 is 500 or 600.
But we were given numbers from, I can't remember the starting lowest one, of the three, but that went up to like $400 a square foot. So then it's like, is that,
And
you know,
before we keep this discussion on the ADUs, what I'm reading right now is that our fund actually is not usable for anything that has less than 3 dwelling units constructed on an individual parcel or multiple lots held in common ownership. So unless you're talking about doing 2 ADUs on top of your own home ownership, we wouldn't be able to fund the likes of ADUs or single family dwelling units anyways.
Chair, if I might, the red is proposed changes.
Right.
So that it could be a little more specific, which was like, I think the idea was in the discussions was not to provide funding for Riley's,
Why not?
right? I know. But instead say, oh, there's a group out there that wants to use a land trust model or wants to do something where they're going to build at least 3, and they would be standalone, they would be single family, maybe in sort of a habitat type model, right? Where the next person who buys it has to also qualify income wise, right? Or if a person passes away, the family members can inherit it only if they also qualify, right? And so to keep those specific buildings affordable in the long term, and by affordable, like someone's actually checking income, they're meeting income requirements, where it would be a slightly larger project. So it would provide the opportunity for standalone instead of a 20-unit apartment building, maybe, but that it still wouldn't be necessarily someone building one home. And so I think that's something really to discuss too. I don't know the commission's thoughts on that because we kind of just went down the ADU and the there was one recommendation that if the city puts in $100,000 a year, maybe 60 of that should be grants, but it wasn't specific about what entities would qualify for grants. And so to answer your question, the proposal is that it would be like, if an applicant came in and said, I'm building 4 standalone that are all going to be land trust community, then that, or 3 in this case. So really, in this new proposal, the ADUs would not really be qualifying.
Yeah.
But whether the commission wants to follow that suggestion or not, which is why I want to kind of hear feedback from all of you. Also, part of what we looked at doing is really getting rid of a lot of different terms and just saying multifamily rental, single family unit, and not talk about, we in here we did a lot of talking about the housing unit type, not the type of person. So there was some language in there that was like people with disabilities and people who are over a certain age and all of those things, where instead we wondered if it was more clear that it's like you meet that 80% or less AMI, and then put in the type of housing to build, not all the different types of people who might need the housing. But then that also talked about, do we want to have this transitional or permanent and non-permanent, and shelters and not shelters, and transitional living, and
Sure.
or do we just want to say
It's for kind of housing.
it's for, is it for housing or is it for shelter?
Speaking as a realtor, if we don't build a whole bunch more housing, everybody's gonna qualify.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Hey, I wanted to pull Tina in so we don't forget her. And see if you had any questions.
Dina, you can go ahead and jump in whenever you want to.
Yeah, thank you. I am taking it all in. I have 1,000 questions, but nothing specific at this time. Thank you.
I do like axing a bunch of specific terms. I do like just leaving it with multifamily and single family dwelling units. To that point, transitional housing still kind of falls under that moniker. If we are considering, of course, doing a project like that. And so it does help reduce confusion, I think, in terms of what we're trying to, I guess I'll use the term advertise, what we're looking at funding.
I think that's really helpful for me. Thank you. Because we have had some potential interested parties and people are trying to figure out, can they use it for shelter? Can they use it to build tiny homes on a property, or can they use it to build like condos on a property, or could they use it, right? And the trying to figure out, especially with the ADUs, right, that somebody doesn't go and build something on their own property that now their income doesn't qualify to live in the building they just built for themselves. Right?
Yeah.
Like I want to make sure we're not like all of a sudden like, yeah, you should do that. And now, oh wait, now actually that's deed restricted and you have to rent it to someone else because you have too much income even as a retiree, right? And I think that comes into some of the fewer than 3 or an individual applying and not an actual.
Take us down an ADU rabbit hole, but I do think.
So I think it's important because the commission asked me about that. So
Well,
really important.
and whether we're using that language or any other language, in general, really, it's just, to me, it gets for what I think is a larger question, which is how small is too small? How small a project is too small?
So if it's achieving,
I mean,
I'm sure the unit cost is.
what's our overarching goal? We want more housing and we want it to be more affordable, and there's a lot that we can do towards that isn't Twin Creeks.
No, yeah, there is an economy of scale too, where we are losing the efficiency of the use of our dollars the smaller we get into our projects. So that's just,
But it'd be hard to get to affordability for an individual, building a unit and then making it and then
The
Yeah,
one
making
thing
it
you
fully understand.
affordability
Yeah.
is the dirt's already paid for,
mhm.
right?
Yep.
And that's a big part of the cost of,
Yeah.
if you're gonna divide out, what's the cost per unit?
I really think-
Per unit out there,
I think what the city needs to do to really get ADUs moving is how to make it more achievable in terms of you have the dirt, which seems, people who look at it, it's like, well, you got to get the water and the sewer, you need to, in Helena, you're not getting by with just, something you wrote up on a napkin here, you're gonna have a civil engineer, just people, just the design people for an ADU would eat up any subsidy you're getting, and so.
if the little house that I have next door to me burns to the ground, I don't have enough room setbacks wise without begging the city to let me put it up next to it.
That was I think the most
Setbacks, et cetera. And
Yeah.
trying-
I think the ADU stuff, what the city hasn't done is dealt with some of those kind of setback issues and things where it's like theoretically you could do something, but you would have to then get waivers and things like that.
So
But we're almost.
a shameless plug, the city is updating the zoning code
Yeah.
as part of the overall land use plan process, etc. So if you have thoughts on that, send them our way as part of the new zoning and subdivision update process. And ADUs have already been addressed in the zoning code, and so we have specific definitions for ADUs. But as far as our residential zoning districts, we have always allowed 2 dwelling units by right in all residential zoning districts. So R1, R2, which would typically be considered single family, we've always allowed 2 dwelling units.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Even before the legislature.
Yeah, even before the
So,
legislature.
Helena
So-
allowed it.
Helena was kind of like ahead of the curve. Yeah.
Kind of, moving and living elsewhere is kind of impressive. Actually, how many duplexes are in town?
Right.
Because
So-
of that, whereas other jurisdictions
So-
don't allow it.
Just some information out there, but we have actually strictly defined ADUs in the
Getting
code.
rid of the minimum lot size, I think.
And we don't have a minimum
Yeah,
lot
you don't have a
size either.
minimum lot size, but it used to be 7,000, and that limited you a lot. Now you can, that's how I think trying to put a deed restriction on something that's part of a larger parcel would be, man, you would have to
Carve
carve
it
it
out
out.
and get dirty. That would get-
But we were to be done at 3:30, so.
Can I just ask
Tiny.
one quick question on people's thoughts before you adjourn? what are your thoughts on the crossing out the allowable grants to single family units that are up to 50% of the cost of the project?
As you want.
Either what the home buyer assistance stuff at.
I want to see some stuff around. I guess I want to know if you have thoughts about whether these should all just stay loans. Yeah. And so under that loan term for single family dwelling unit development, at one point there was, I guess, a desire to promote land trusts. So in that they said, oh, certain things can happen if you're putting it in a land trust that you wouldn't get if you weren't. And some of the suggestion from staff and other entities is that a single family development doesn't qualify at all unless you're using a land trust. You have to do some sort of land trust type method so the property is protected. And that it's still a loan, it's not.
Doing protecting that without being a land trust. I think a land trust is where people are doing it, and I think it's a good model, but there's other restrictions where the value of the money that's put in, you share in the same to make easy numbers, say the down payment is 25% of $100,000, so $25,000. The rest of it they finance. So years later, when they sell the house, new value, the payout is 25% of that new value, which was kind of the model for years and years, especially with housing costs exploding. A lot of homeowners like, that's my money. No,
It's all of us.
yeah. So and then you get a little more integration, and it's not like one neighborhood or this or that. I think the land trust should be supported, but I don't think it's necessary to say it's the only way that you can develop affordable homes, because you could also, a developer could maybe, because they want to give back or something, they're doing a larger project and they're going to get to your idea where you're doing a smaller scale kind of thing. It's like, well, I'm going to make this affordable, and you're going to give me a token payment on it or something.
But do you feel like even single family should be loans, or should they have the opportunity for grants?
Well, it's what it is on the loan, what it is you pay it back when you sell it down the road. It doesn't have to be amortizing, you're paying it off year in, year out, which makes it difficult. But usually, to the degree that whatever your original portion is, I've seen it. I see people sometimes, we go, oh, but now it's worth this much. Well, no, that was the deal from the beginning. But generally, it's a good way of capturing and preserving, and then to make sure that funds then go back into affordable housing. It's recaptured and paid for the new street sweeper. It kind of defeats the purpose, but it should be kind of a closed fund.
Do any of you have any things that you think should really be in here, or thoughts that maybe aren't captured in this that you want me to share with the commission?
So you're saying that the end of this month,
I'm on schedule to give another update to the commission and to answer some of the questions they had about grants and ADUs and other things. This is not necessarily a final version that's going to them unless they look at it and say, actually, we want to do all this, and then they do that. So I want to make sure if you have any thoughts now. I don't know that they would.
A lot of enthusiasm for grants.
Okay.
That's just my gut reaction.
that I would say do on sale loans, different meanings of the word loan.
Yeah.
As long as you open that up to a variety of possibilities. And as to ADUs, I think that must be, it wouldn't be great for us to have ADUs. It's go back to the basics, which is affordable. I mean, so we're trying to get affordable homes for working, just so everyone in Helena could afford a place. Not every project's gonna be affordable to every element, but if the purpose is to build an ADU without affordability, then it's a different kind of thing. And until you can kind of show how you can do the ADU,
How you can tie it to an affordability metric.
Yeah, I mean,
Which is fine. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do that, but yeah,
We might see proposals that show us that too. We've heard a lot of murmurings about some potential projects or projects that might want to come into the fund, or people who've been calling and asking a variety of questions as they're trying to figure out what kind of developments they want to do. And also we might see some applications for rehabilitation of existing buildings that are getting close to the end of their period of affordability. And so I want to make sure that we're ready for any type of project that might come in, and that we're not, skewing this in any way, but that some of the questions I haven't been able to answer, whether a project,
definitely that's a eligible use.
qualified use.
but it's also probably not a $200,000 use, right? Like somebody that was doing something like that might come and apply for the maximum amount, right? Like those are pretty expensive projects.
Rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just want to let you know, we might see some applications that are asking for all of this. And so hearing like the questions about dollar amounts, I want to make sure, that they're enough, but also that there's no gap and not.
We still have other kind of loan requirements or match requirements. I think we're at least relatively covered in terms of the ratio of the funds we're distributing versus the size of the project. I'm not too concerned in that regard.
And you guys, how do you feel at all about it really being more rental or single family and less about shelters? You have thoughts on that? I mean, places like the YWCA do charge rent.
Yeah.
And that is multifamily housing per code. So, I mean, as I said earlier, I do like removing, I guess, some of the extra monikers to help really just generalize what we are advertising for in terms of what we are going to, fund. I guess removing the specification of transient housing might further confuse them whether or not they can apply for it, but I most certainly would agree that this fund is a very good use for those cases.
But it generally, I think the way it's written is that the default is that it should be a loan fund, and there'd be a case made why it would be a grant, but unless you want to be done with it, you call it a grant fund it'd be over, let's move on. But and then there's not a lot of, I do think there's a general misunderstanding of the lack of resources in the city of Helena versus, well, why can't you be, let's get hop in the car and go see what they're doing in Missoula or doing, give me $10 million. You see a lot happen. But the one questioning here in terms of our board, remember, did we get reappointed? So I ended up having to reapply. Are you president in perpetuity? I know. They're doing a coup.
I can look up.
Yeah, but I think we've been renewed, but I'm forgetting. So if this is 2020,
I will check what meeting we held the election in which you were elected. Because we had a guidance.
History in this building of being elected chair to things forever. I've been chair for 20 years.
Just to update you all. So Riley, Michael, and John, you are all three on your second term, which is your final term, and those expire on January 31st of 2027.
So we're at the end of our natural.
Yes. And if you know of anyone in your sector who would be interested in serving, Get them to apply as soon as you can, so we're not in the situation of not having a quorum again.
Yeah.
So for Michael, anyone in the nonprofit housing sector, John, anyone in realty, and
You need to
Riley,
find
anyone.
two lenders.
Yeah,
Still-
I was hoping we'd have at least a finance.
Yeah, we have not been able to
That's all.
secure someone from the banking or finance. But I was speaking with Danae, the clerk of the commission, right before this meeting, and we're actually gonna be working with the PIO on a series highlighting the different boards and the vacancies. So she suggested that this board might be a good one to start with.
Yep.
So,
And Chair, thank you
Better.
for indulging me in some of these questions. I just want to make sure as I'm going before the commission, I'm giving everybody.
I worry a little bit about, as an advisory board, I would like something a little more formal that we'd be presenting to the commission. You know, we haven't been able to meet, you know, they may not know, we haven't met, that we're just, I should have been more on the ball as to, that we're good. I thought we were going to get everyone kind of back up to speed on the program guidelines, not that we'd make recommendations, you know, I think we would all come at it a little differently. And that we would say, yeah, we're all in agreement with this. I don't know what you do. I think we had some really good feedback, but I don't know how you package it. But I guess the takeaway is that we want it to be, you know, a sustainable kind of process to a certain degree, that very low interest, but or some other strategy, but it would remain a loan fund in some fashion, and then primary focus is on providing housing. And so whether it's, we don't have to talk about how long people are being housed, but and that this fund is not to cover the bulk of the costs, but it's again the match. Even at 5-to-1 is an aggressive match for certain types of project, but that we would expect that the leverage would match what the project is. So if someone coming in, you know, with say a tax credit project, that the leverage is, they wouldn't be getting it done anyway, but the leverage should be so much higher depending on it's we have that minimum standard, but it should be reflective of the type of project that you're doing.
And Chair, that's helpful. And for people who maybe weren't at the last meeting when we actually went through this, there were a lot of line item changes and suggestions that board made, and then made the motion that that current package was recommendations they wanted conveyed to the
To the board,
commission.
yeah.
And so then also staff went through, different departments went through, added in their thoughts, and was what the update to the commission was. And so at the end of this month, it is not intended as an item for action.
Okay.
Or even a specific like yes, no on any of the line item changes, unless the commission chooses to kind of go that way, but it's more a follow-up to some of the questions they had and trying to figure out the intent of this current commission, how it matches to the ordinance and resolution that existed, knowing that was created a while ago in a different environment for housing. So unless the commission looks and says, yep, and we want to do this and we want it to go forward for approval, my thought is that the August meeting of this board would happen before an additional action would be taken by the commission. And then I would update the board on any thoughts or changes they asked.
You're saying you think we get one more swing at this?
So
I think so, unless all of a sudden they said, hey, we want to do this.
said we should
Really
get all the a little more to the guidelines that we all now are been reviewing here. The other piece I think, just as a general takeaway from this conversation is that recommending that those items that are currently stated as a hard and fast kind of a dollar amount kind of thing, in terms of just we should refer to this benchmarking that would occur based on, you know, reasonable kind of thing, rather than that it gets locked in and then we look back at it a few years later and go, well, that's, you know, the
Right.
operational costs, you know, jumps out at me, but there was other examples in there that, and whether or not we should also, that the per unit subsidy should probably also be on some sort of adjuster too, and maybe that's something that would be readjusted outside of having to go back to the commission, but it would be based on some benchmark. It might be, consumer price index, or I don't know what, or prime, whatever the increase in the interest rates, or interest rate could be tied to some, it's to be meant to be well below the market rate. It's supposed to be a subsidized thing, but there should be, it doesn't have to be 1%.
That's all very helpful, and like I said, the intent is to provide updates and get more feedback from the commission. There were a lot of items on that agenda at that meeting, and so they didn't get as in-depth into direction for staff or the board. But I will also send you, once I know it's actually been approved as an agenda item for the request I put in, I will send it to all of you, because admin meetings are also public meetings. They're open to everyone. You can come representing yourselves. Because I don't know if they might then ask to have a final document presented to them sooner than I would think. But I've understood this to be informational updates based on the questions they asked last time. But I don't want you to think all of a sudden they say, actually, we want to do all of this, or we want to do none of it, that they sidestepped anything. So I want to make sure you know that that's not the intent, but also it's their direction. So, but they don't take action at the admin meetings, right? So their direction would potentially be bring this to us at another full commission meeting, right? So
you're just meeting them in the admin meeting. We'll meet again, probably discuss any potential discussions you may have had, and then, like you said, you'll have to bring it to the open commissioner meeting to finalize it.
For them to take action on this, they would have to actually do it at a commission meeting. So it's not like they're going to accept all of these red lines and green lines at that meeting, but they may provide the direction that says we want this on an agenda in 2 weeks, right? Which at that point, you would maybe have your meeting before that. Right. And so I just want to make sure that it's not like we're hiding anything or doing that. I don't know what their desire is, which is why we're going through this process and getting feedback from this room and outside this room, so that we have best possible options for the commission to think about, and then go from there what direction they want to do. But I do really appreciate this conversation and getting back into this so that I have a good sense. Like I said, we had some other people provide feedback just because they saw it on an agenda item, based on potential projects they maybe are looking at as well, applying for these funds. And so I think the more opportunities there's for the public that maybe works in this realm. So I really appreciate the conversation. I know we've gone over, typically, even though our meetings are scheduled for an hour and a half, they typically go less than an hour. So sorry about that, but I appreciate your time.
We haven't met for over a year. I figured there might be a little bit of catch up.
Okay, just saying howdy. Alrighty, and we're just back to our agenda that we have. We'd like to ask for public comments. Anyone wishing to make public comment? Not seeing any.
We have no one online.
All right, so and then member communications, anything you'd like to share or proposals for our next agenda? And then our next board meeting is August 12th at 2 p.m. up here, and we'll be on Zoom. Did the city change their rules on flexibility on Zoom?
So if you can't be here in person, you're absolutely allowed to be on Zoom.
What they saying? It's like
Just video.
They did provide requirement that a certain percentage needed to be in person, but
I think
we have not received specific guidance for advisory boards on how to track that or what happens.
People that works.
That is a question I will ask the clerk, so we have good, clear information for the next meeting.
The one requirement is if you are online, you do need to have video on.
Yes.
So, but we tend to be a bit more lenient.
I'm sorry.
Short time.
Get your good shit.
So were there any other things for the agenda for next?
I didn't hear any. I think we're gonna review the
Just re-review any discussion.
and update on
Yeah,
that
from the administration meeting.
administrative meeting, and then we'll come back with some additional
Would
points.
you be okay if it looks like it's going that way, that I put an agenda item on for a tentative schedule for opening,
Sure.
so that we can pre-approve that as well?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Tina. I know it was a lot.
Favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Everyone.